Step 2. Skillful thinking. It's no mystery that thinking can make us happy or miserable. Let's say you're sitting under a tree one fine spring day. Nothing particular is happening to you, except perhaps the breeze is ruffling your hair, yet in your mind, you're far away. Maybe you're remembering another spring day several years back when you were feeling terrible. You had just lost your job, or failed an exam, or your cat had wandered off. That memory turns into a worry. What if I lose my job again? Why did I ever say such and such to so-and-so? No doubt this or that will happen, and I will be out on my ear. Now I'm really in for it. How will I pay my bills? One worry brings up another, which brings up yet another. Soon you feel your life is in a shambles, but all this while you've been sitting under the tree. Fantasies, fears, and other kinds of obsessional thinking are a big problem for us. We all tend to lock into unhealthy thought patterns, grooves we have worn into our consciousness that keep us circling in familiar tracks, leading to unhappiness. The second step of the Buddha's path offers us an escape from this pattern, a way of redirecting our thoughts in positive and helpful directions. When we begin to understand things rightly, through mindfulness of the key points of the first step of the path, our mind naturally flows into skillful thinking. Thinking here refers not only to thoughts, but to any intentional mind state. As we come to understand that desire as the cause of dissatisfaction, we see that thoughts connected to attachment and aversion always lead to unhappiness. Skillful thinking consists of abandoning negative thoughts, such as grasping, hatred, and cruelty, and replacing them with wholesome thoughts, such as letting go, loving friendliness, and compassion. These skillful thoughts work as antidotes to obsession and worry and move us along on the path toward permanent happiness. Letting go. Letting go is the opposite of desire or attachment. Think of it as generosity in the highest sense. Along the Buddha's path, we will have the opportunity to give away or let go of everything that holds us back from our goal of the highest happiness. Possessions, people, beliefs and opinions, even our attachment to our own mind and body. When people hear this, they sometimes start to worry. They think that to follow the Buddha's teachings, they have to give everything away and join a monastery. Though becoming a monk or a nun is indeed one way of practicing generosity, most people can let go in the midst of busy, family-centered lives. What we need to reject is not the things we have or our family and friends, but rather our mistaken sense that these are our possessions. We need to let go of our habit of clinging to the people and the material things in our lives, and to our ideas, beliefs, and opinions. Material generosity. Letting go is a gradual process. Before we actually give anything away, we have to cultivate the thought of generosity. We do this by considering carefully what generosity means and by looking at the pitfalls and advantages of practicing it. A good place to begin is with the easiest type of generosity, giving away material things. Notice, first of all, how our mind tricks us into avoiding the thought of generosity. We tell ourselves that in order to be generous, we first must have a lot to give. Just wait until I get rich, we say. Then I'll build shelters for the homeless and hospitals and beautiful meditation centers. Think of all the people I'll be able to help. So we collect, accumulate, and invest a little bit here and there. As our investments grow, we get busier and busier taking care of them, and more attached to what we have. Somehow there doesn't seem to be any time to practice generosity. Another trick the mind plays is attaching an ulterior motive to our generosity. Giving someone a gift, we discover, makes us feel good. Sometimes we enjoy the experience of giving a gift even more than the recipient enjoys getting it. Giving makes us feel proud. Our ego is pleased by how beautiful or expensive the gift is, by the message it carries about our good taste or our sense of style. Moreover, we may secretly feel that the person who gets the gift now has an obligation to us. We may even be using our excessive generosity to demean the recipient. When we give something away, some element of seeking enjoyment is generally present. Giving so that we feel good, or so that someone will think well of us or owe us a favor, corrupts our generosity. Another kind of less than skillful giving occurs when we make a gift to avoid painful feelings. For example, a family may donate money so that a park or public building is named after a lost loved one. The gift may be a way of transferring their grasping from the loved one to the idea of a permanent monument. True generosity lets go not only of wealth or possessions, but of clinging to a person who has died and to feelings of sorrow or anger. A wealthy couple I knew once gave away everything they owned after the death of their only child. Though they made a show of giving their money to charity, they really gave out of anger. They wanted to blunt the feeling of pain over losing their child by punishing themselves. Monasteries and charities may benefit greatly from such gifts, but the giver does not fully benefit. On the other hand, people may make such gifts in order to transform their grief into generous, loving, friendly thoughts. This generosity is skillful and brings healing. The best giving occurs when we have no expectations of any return, not even a thank you. We give well knowing that we already have in our hearts everything we need to be happy. Such giving is motivated by a sense of fullness, not loss. Giving anonymously and without knowing the recipient is a wonderful way to be generous. Giving quietly, without fanfare, lessens our desire and reduces our attachments to the things we have. The highest form of material giving happens when we respond to others' needs at the risk of our own lives. On television news, I once saw a man do this after there had been a terrible accident. On a cold winter day in 1983, an airplane leaving Washington, D.C. for Florida never managed to gain altitude because of ice on the wings. It crashed into the 14th Street Bridge. Most on board were killed. Many fell to the ice-covered Potomac River, smashing through the ice into freezing water. At one spot where people were crawling out of the water onto the broken ice, a rescue helicopter approached and dropped a cable within reach of a man, but instead of grasping it and saving his life, he helped a woman grab the line. She was flown to safety. The helicopter returned, and even though the man was freezing, he again passed the cable to a woman, and she too was saved. When the helicopter returned a third time, this man had died from the cold. But we do not need an opportunity to act heroically, nor do we need great wealth to practice generosity. All we need is the willingness to give of ourselves, even in some small way. With that thought, we can, for example, spend time with people, helping them to overcome their loneliness. Better yet, we can help them to overcome dissatisfaction by sharing with them what we have learned of the Buddha's path and what we know about the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Such sharing excels all other gifts. Clinging to people, experiences, and beliefs. As we are coming to discover, pain arises from clinging to anything. Form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. Letting go of our tendency to cling to people, experiences, and beliefs is more difficult than giving away material things, but it is even more important to our ultimate happiness. Clinging to bodily form has two aspects. Most obviously, we cling to other people in our lives. Clinging is not the same as loving. It is not the same as caring for someone's welfare and wanting that person to be happy. It is rather a jealous or obsessive possessiveness that seeks to own another person. We can all think of examples of husbands and wives who try to possess each other, or of friends who are so bossy and controlling that they strangle the friendship. Practicing generosity in human relationships means trusting another person and allowing him or her to enjoy space and freedom and dignity. However, even good relationships can have an element of clinging. All happy married couples hope that their marriage will last. An element of fear is always there. He will leave. She will die. It may be painful to think of this, but we must remember that every marriage, no matter how happy, ends in separation. Even if a couple lives together for 50 years and dies together in bliss, at the time of death they must part and go their separate ways according to their past deeds. A more subtle kind of clinging to the body is our attachment to our physical form and to our belief that we are in control of it. No matter how healthy and strong our body is now, we know that it will deteriorate with age and become weak and sick. Moreover, we cannot control what happens to our bodies. We cannot control whether our next sensation will be pleasant or unpleasant. Nor can we control the stream of thoughts entering our minds. For instance, try not to think of the image of a dog. Any luck? We cannot control even this much. We try to defend ourselves against the onslaught of constant change by building up concepts and images and hanging on tight to my house, my car, my job, my partner, my body, as if these things had their own existence that we could depend upon. At the bottom of our holding on to these things is terror. With time, no matter how tightly we hold on, everything in this world shifts and changes. The images we hold so tightly will shatter like glass. Then how we suffer. Possessing, clinging, or holding on to anything makes life more painful. Using a material possession without clinging helps us avoid heartbreak when it is lost, broken, or stolen. Also, holding on to our families and friends or to our sense of personal identity, my title or occupation, my family background, my position in the world, leads to suffering when, as is inevitable, these concepts dissolve. When we do not cling, our mind is always at peace. This relaxed attitude consoles us, comforts us, and reduces our tension, anxiety, worry, and fear. Developing an attitude of not clinging requires at first that we spend a certain amount of time alone. Many of us cling to the experience of being with others out of fear of being lonely, but aloneness is not loneliness. Rather, it is singleness that creates space for us to think, reflect, meditate, and free the mind from noise and attachment. As our greed, hatred, and delusion diminish through our solitary practice of mindfulness and meditation, we strengthen our ability to be with others without clinging. When the mind is at peace, we can be in company with many people without attachment and the suffering it brings. The Buddha walked many miles every day with thousands of monks, nuns, and lay people around him. Some came to live with him, some came to talk to him, some came to discuss their problems with him, some came to ask him questions, some came to argue with him, some came simply to listen to his discourses. The Buddha carried his aloneness with him, even in a crowd. His attitude of non-attachment was total. Occasionally, some of the monks, nuns, or lay people who followed the Buddha spent time alone in the forests perfecting their practice of non-attachment. But they did not live in the forest forever. As they let go of attachment, they learned to live with other people while maintaining a solid, well-grounded state of mind. That state of mind is called renunciation. Renunciation is not only for monks and nuns, but for anyone who loves solitude or who longs to live without bondage. All renounced people, even monks and nuns, live with others some of the time. Mindfulness of skillful thinking helps us create a stable psychological state so that we are not bothered by the changing conditions of our physical environment or by other people. Like the Buddha, we learn to carry our renunciation within ourselves. Letting go of clinging also requires that we renounce attachment to our beliefs, opinions, and ideas. This is difficult. We tend to derive our sense of personal identity, to define ourselves, by what we think about various issues. Often we get so caught up in this identification that we feel personally attacked when someone criticizes the political candidate we are supporting or our opinion about some question of public policy. Yet our ideals, opinions, or views are also subject to the law of impermanence. Think back to what you believed at age 16 or at age 30, and you'll see just how changeable your personal beliefs are. On a larger scale, throughout history, people all over the world have gone to war in the name of their cherished opinions or beliefs. The amount of killing we humans do to protect our material possessions is insignificant as compared to the killing we do to protect unwholesome beliefs, such as racial or religious bigotry. Bring to mind the cherished beliefs that have led to war, and ask whether protecting them was worth war's terrible cost. Letting go of unwholesome thoughts, words, and deeds creates the space for us to cultivate wholesome thoughts, such as loving friendliness, appreciative joy, non-violence, and equanimity. But we should not be attached even to these wholesome thoughts. Letting go requires us to go beyond good and evil. In the end, the Buddha told us even his teachings must be cast aside. These teachings are like a raft to be abandoned once you have crossed the flood. Since you should abandon even good states of mind generated by these teachings, how much more so should you abandon bad states of mind? I am not suggesting that you will be able to give up your clinging all of a sudden or become liberated overnight. Seeking instant enlightenment can be just a big ego trip. As I travel and teach, sometimes people approach me and inform me that they have quickly reached enlightenment. I respond by quoting the Buddha's description of the attributes of someone who has attained stages of enlightenment. Since the people speaking to me do not have these attributes, they sometimes become very disappointed or even angry with me because my response does not please their egos. Attachment is built into our psyches and strengthened over many lifetimes. It is impossible to let it go quickly or easily. We do not have to wait lifetimes to make a start, however. With proper understanding, patience, effort, and mindfulness, we can begin to free ourselves from our bondage and even attain full enlightenment in this lifetime. To achieve happiness, we must start today to develop the skillful thought of letting go of attachment and replacing it with open-minded generosity, flexibility, and detachment. Dealing with fear. When we begin to practice mindfulness of letting go, we often stumble on fear. Fear arises because of an insecure, emotional, or greedy attachment to ideas, concepts, feelings, or physical objects, including our own body. It can also be caused by coming into contact with something that we do not understand, or whose outcome is uncertain. Say, for example, that you have recently been told that you have cancer. You are scheduled to have surgery, after which your doctors will decide whether more treatment is needed. Now you are trying to meditate. So many thoughts run through your mind. The thoughts and feelings build on each other, and you become increasingly agitated, upset, and very afraid. What should you do? As you sit in meditation, watch as each mental state arises. If many thoughts and feelings come up at once, try to distinguish between them. What is going to happen to me? Fear. How dare the nurse say that to me? Anger. They need me. I can't be sick. I can't die. Attachment. This is the same diagnosis my friend had. His wife still cries when we talk about him. Sadness. I hate needles. Aversion. Who should go with me to the next appointment? Restlessness and worry. How many people survive this thing? Fear. As you begin to sort them out, your thoughts and feelings become more manageable. You stop being so caught up in the frightening stories that the mind is conjuring up, and you can start to reason with yourself. You can bring to mind consoling thoughts, the skill and compassion of your doctors and nurses, the recent advances in treatment, the people you know who are living full lives despite a diagnosis like yours. As you counter the ideas that have been feeding your fear, you are practicing mindfulness in action. You can see how the mind plays games with itself, using thoughts to create fear and fear to create more thoughts. This may also be a good time for self-reflection. You might examine your past behavior for times when fear caused you to act in unskillful ways. You can resolve to remain mindful and not allow fear to cause you to act in such ways in the future. Now that your mind is calm and clear, you can go back to meditating on the breath or other meditation object. Accept the fact that fearful thoughts will arise in your meditation from time to time. With the experience you have gained, you can ignore their specific content and just witness what happens to all thoughts and feelings. You see that every mental object rises and peaks, no matter how intense it is, if you stay with it, as if it were a friend who wants to hold your hand while walking through a difficult experience. You will also see every mental object fall away. Now that you have noticed the thinking process itself, you gain confidence that no matter how frightening a train of thought may be at the time, it eventually comes to an end. Once you have managed to sit with strong fear completely, you will no longer see fear the same way. You'll know that fear is just a natural mind state that comes and goes. It has no substance and cannot hurt you. Your attitude around fear begins to soften. You know that you can observe and let go of whatever arises. As you lose the fear of fear, you gain a sense of freedom. The same strategy works with other unpleasant states of mind, including memories, imaginings, daydreams, or worries about problems you are facing. Sometimes you may be afraid of unpleasant memories because you think that you may not be able to handle them. But now you know that you can handle any state of mind that you might ordinarily want to repress. Your practice of mindfulness has taught you that it is not the mental states themselves that make you uncomfortable, but your attitude toward them. You may have the idea that mental states are part of your own personality, part of your existence. Then you try to reject the unpleasant ones as if they were foreign bodies. But you cannot really reject any of them because they were not yours in the first place. Your best response is to maintain a steady practice of observing your mind, without reacting with clinging or aversion to anything that comes up, but skillfully working to free the mind from all unwholesome states. Loving friendliness. As you let go of negative states of mind, you create the space in your mind for the cultivation of positive thoughts. Skillful thinking means that we replace angry or hostile thoughts with thoughts of loving friendliness. Loving friendliness, or metta, is a natural capacity. It is a warm wash of fellow feeling, a sense of interconnectedness with all beings. Because we wish for peace, happiness, and joy for ourselves, we know that all beings must wish for these qualities. Loving friendliness radiates to the whole world the wish that all beings enjoy a comfortable life with harmony, mutual appreciation, and appropriate abundance. Though we all have the seed of loving friendliness within us, we must make the effort to cultivate it. When we are rigid, uptight, tense, anxious, full of worries and fears, our natural capacity for loving friendliness cannot flourish. To nurture the seed of loving friendliness, we must learn to relax. In a peaceful state of mind, such as we get from mindfulness meditation, we can forget our past differences with others and forgive their faults, weaknesses, and offenses. Then loving friendliness naturally grows within us. As is the case with generosity, loving friendliness begins with a thought. Typically, our minds are full of views, opinions, beliefs, ideas. We have been conditioned by our culture, traditions, education, associations, and experiences. From these mental conditions, we have developed prejudices and judgments. These rigid ideas stifle our natural loving friendliness. Yet within this tangle of confused thinking, the idea of our friendly interconnection with others does come up occasionally. We catch a glimpse of it as we might glimpse a tree during a flash of lightning. As we learn to relax and let go of negativity, we begin to recognize our biases and not let them dominate our minds. Then the thought of loving friendliness begins to shine, showing its true strength and beauty. The loving friendliness that we wish to cultivate is not love as we ordinarily understand it. When you say you love so-and-so, what you conceive in your mind is generally an emotion conditioned by the behavior or qualities of that person. Perhaps you admire the person's appearance, manner, ideas, voice, or attitude. Should these conditions change, or your tastes, whims, and fancies change, what you call love might change as well. In extreme cases, your love might even turn to hate. This love-hate duality pervades all our ordinary feelings of affection. You love one person and hate another. Or you love now and hate later. Or you love whenever you feel like it and hate whenever you feel like it. Or you love when everything is smooth and rosy and hate when anything goes wrong. If your love changes from time to time, place to place, and situation to situation in this fashion, then what you call love is not the skillful thought of loving friendliness. It may be erotic lust, greed for material security, desire to feel loved, or some other form of greed in disguise. True loving friendliness has no ulterior motive. It never changes into hate as circumstances change. It never makes you angry if you do not get favors in return. Loving friendliness motivates you to behave kindly to all beings at all times, and to speak gently in their presence and in their absence. When fully matured, your net of loving friendliness embraces everything in the universe without exception. It has no limitations, no boundaries. Your thought of loving friendliness includes not only all beings as they are at this moment, but also your wish that all of them, without any discrimination or favoritism, will be happy in the limitless future. Let me tell you a story of the powerful, far-reaching effects that an act of loving friendliness can have. In a little house in India lived an old lady and her young daughter. Nearby, in a hut, lived a meditating monk. Out of respect, the old lady called the monk her son and asked her daughter to treat him as her brother. Every morning the monk went to the village to collect cooked food for his midday meal. He never forgot to stop at the little house to get the small quantity of food that old lady and her daughter offered him with great affection and devotion. Every afternoon he returned to the village to see his supporters and encourage them to practice meditation and live peaceful lives. One afternoon, on his way to the village, the monk overheard a conversation between the old lady and her daughter. The old lady told her daughter, "Darling, tomorrow your brother will come to our house on his arms round. Here is ghee, here is honey, here is rice, here are spices, here are vegetables. Make sure that you prepare a delicious meal for him." The daughter asked the mother, "Where will you go tomorrow?" "I plan to spend the day in the forest meditating by myself." "But what will you eat?" "I will make a little rice soup from today's leftover rice. That is enough for me. But make sure that you make a good meal for your brother and offer it to him when he comes to our house." Hearing this conversation, the monk thought, "This old lady loves and respects me so much that she ordered her daughter to make a delicious meal for me when she herself is going to eat a simple rice soup made out of stale rice. I don't deserve that delicious meal until I attain full enlightenment. I must make myself worthy of her loving gift. This is the time for me to make unremitting effort to liberate myself from all negative states of mind." The monk hung up his upper robe. He decided not to go to the village again to collect food until he had attained full liberation of mind. He sat down on his meditation seat, making the following resolution: "Let my blood dry up, let my flesh wither, let this body be reduced to a skeleton. I shall not get up from this seat without attaining the final stage of liberation." With that vow, the monk meditated the entire afternoon, the entire night, and part of next morning. Just before the time came for him to go on his alms round, he attained his goal. Then the monk put on his robes and went to the village taking his alms bowl. When he visited the little house, the daughter of the old lady offered him the delicious meal. The young lady waited anxiously for her mother to return home from her day's meditation. That evening, as soon as the mother arrived home, the daughter ran up to her and said, "Mother, I have never seen our monk so serene, so composed, so radiant, calm, so beautiful." "My dear, he must have attained true freedom, liberation from negative states of mind. We are very fortunate to have such a monk so close to our home. But if we really honor him, we must follow in his footsteps. From now on, let us meditate more vigorously so that we might achieve the same state." So both mother and daughter meditated until they, too, reached higher states of attainment. Many villagers followed their example and attained stages of enlightenment. Such was the far-reaching effect of the loving friendliness of an old lady. Loving your enemies. Some people wonder how they can extend the feeling of loving friendliness toward their enemies. They wonder how they can say sincerely, "May my enemies be well, happy and peaceful. May no difficulties or problems come to them." This question arises from mistaken thinking. A person whose mind is filled with problems may behave in a way that offends or harms us. We call that person an enemy. But in actuality, there is no such person as an enemy. It is the person's negative state of mind that is causing us problems. Mindfulness shows us that states of mind are not permanent. They are temporary, correctable, adjustable. In practical terms, the best thing I can do to assure my own peace and happiness is to help my enemies overcome their problems. If all my enemies were free of pain, dissatisfaction, affliction, neurosis, paranoia, tension, and anxiety, they would no longer have reason to be my enemies. Once free of negativity, an enemy is just like anybody else, a wonderful human being. We can practice loving friendliness on anyone: parents, teachers, relatives, friends, unfriendly people, indifferent people, people who cause us problems. We do not have to know or be close to people to practice loving friendliness toward them. In fact, sometimes it's easier not to know people. Why? Because if we don't know them, we can treat all people alike. We can look at the many, many beings in the universe as if they were specks of light in space and wish them all to be happy and at peace. Though merely wishing may not make this so, cultivating the hope that others might enjoy loving friendliness is a skillful thought that fills our own minds with contentment and joy. If everyone holds the thought that everyone else enjoys loving friendliness, we will have peace on earth. Say there are 6 billion people in this world, and each one cultivates this wish. Who will be left to cultivate hatred? There will be no more struggle, no more fighting. Every action comes from thinking. If the thought is impure, the actions that follow from that thought will be impure and harmful. The opposite is also true. As the Buddha told us, the pure thought of loving friendliness is more powerful than hatred, more powerful than weapons. Weapons destroy. Loving friendliness helps beings live in peace and harmony. Which do you think is more lasting and more powerful? Dealing with anger. The main obstacle to loving friendliness is anger. When anger and hatred consume us, there is no room in our minds for friendly feelings toward ourselves or toward others, no space for relaxation or peace. We each react to anger in our own way. Some people try to justify their angry feelings. They tell themselves again and again, "I have every right to be angry." Others hold on to their anger for a long time, even months or years. They feel that their anger makes them very special, very righteous. Still others lash out physically against those who anger them. Whatever your style, you can be sure of one thing. Your anger ultimately hurts you more than it hurts the person you're angry with. Have you noticed how you feel when you are angry? Do you experience tension, pain in your chest, burning in your stomach, blurred eyesight? Does your reasoning become unclear or your speech turn harsh and unpleasant? Doctors tell us that these common manifestations of anger have serious consequences for our health. High blood pressure, nightmares, insomnia, ulcers, even heart disease. The emotional toll of anger is equally grim. To put it bluntly, anger makes us feel miserable. Anger also disrupts our relationships. Don't you generally try to avoid people who are angry? In the same way, when you are angry, people avoid you. No one wants to associate with someone in the grip of anger. An angry person can be irrational, even dangerous. Moreover, anger often does no damage to the person toward whom it is directed. In most cases, your anger with someone who insulted you harms that person not at all. Rather, it's you who are red in the face, you who are shouting and making a scene, you who look ridiculous and feel miserable. Your adversary may even find your anger entertaining. An attitude of habitual ill will and resentment can adversely affect your health, your relationships, your livelihood, your future. You yourself may even experience the terrible things you wished upon your adversary. Since it's clear that anger can hurt us, what can we do about it? How can we let go of anger and replace it with loving friendliness? In working with anger, we must first determine to restrain ourselves from acting on angry impulses. Whenever I think about restraint, I remember my uncle's elephant. When I was a little boy, my uncle had a big, beautiful elephant. My friends and I used to like to tease this animal. We would throw stones at her until she became angry with us. The elephant was so big she could have crushed us if she had wanted to. What she did instead was remarkable. One time when we threw stones at her, the elephant used her trunk to grab a stick about the size of a pencil and to spank us with this little stick. She showed great self-restraint, doing only what was needed to make us respect her. For a few days after that, the elephant held a grudge against us and would not let us ride her. My uncle told us to take her to the big creek, where we scrubbed her skin with coconut shells while she relaxed and enjoyed the cool water. After that, she completely let go of her anger toward us. Now I tell my students, when you feel justified in reacting violently out of anger, remember the moderate response of my uncle's big, gentle elephant. Another way of dealing with anger is to reflect on its results. We know very well that when we are angry, we do not see the truth clearly. As a result, we may commit many unwholesome actions. As we have learned, our past intentional actions are the only thing we really own. Our future life is determined by our intentional actions today, just as our present life is heir to our previous intentional behavior. Intentional actions committed under the influence of anger cannot lead to a happy future. The best antidote to feelings of anger is patience. Patience does not mean letting others walk all over you. Patience means buying time with mindfulness so that you can act rightly. When we react to provocation with patience, we speak the truth at the right time and in the right tone. We use soft, kind and appropriate words as if we were speaking to a child or a dear friend to prevent him from doing something harmful to himself or others. Though you may raise your voice, this does not mean that you are angry. Rather, you are being skillful in protecting someone you care about. A famous story illustrates the Buddha's patience and resourcefulness when confronted by an angry person. Once there was a Brahmin, a person of high rank and authority. This Brahmin had a habit of getting angry, even for no reason. He quarreled with everyone. If someone else was wronged and did not get angry, the Brahmin would get angry at that person for not being angry. The Brahmin had heard that the Buddha never got angry. One day he went to the Buddha and abused him with insults. The Buddha listened compassionately and patiently. Then he asked the Brahmin, "Do you have any family or friends or relatives?" "Yes, I have many relatives and friends," the Brahmin replied. "Do you visit them periodically?" the Buddha asked. "Of course, I visit them often." "Do you carry gifts for them when you visit them?" "Surely, I never go to see them without a gift," said the Brahmin. The Buddha asked, "When you give gifts to them, suppose they do not accept them. What would you do with these gifts?" "I would take them home and enjoy them with my family," answered the Brahmin. Then the Buddha said, "Similarly, friend, you gave me a gift. I do not accept it. It is all yours. Take it home and enjoy it with your family." The man was deeply embarrassed. He understood and admired the Buddha's compassionate advice. Finally, to overcome anger, you can consider the benefits of loving friendliness. According to the Buddha, when you practice loving friendliness, you sleep in comfort, wake up in comfort, and dream sweet dreams. You are dear to human beings and to non-human beings. Deities guard you, if you are filled with loving friendliness at that moment. Fire, poison, and weapons cannot affect you. You concentrate easily. Your face is serene. You die unconfused and are reborn in the highest realm of existence. Aren't these prospects more pleasant than the misery, poor health, and ill will we get as a result of anger? As your awareness of your mental states increases, you will recognize more and more quickly when you are becoming angry. Then, as soon as angry thoughts arise, you can begin to apply the antidotes of patience and mindfulness. You should also take every opportunity to make restitution for your angry actions. If you said or did something to someone in anger, as soon as that moment has passed, you should consider going to this person to apologize, even if you think the other person was wrong or acted worse than you did. Spending a few minutes apologizing to someone you offended produces marvelous and immediate relief for both of you. In the same spirit, if you see that someone is angry with you, you can approach this person and talk in a relaxed way to try to find the cause of the anger. You might say, I am sorry you're angry with me. I'm not angry with you at all. Perhaps we can work this out as friends. You might also give a gift to the person you think is angry with you. A gift tames the untamed and makes friends of foes. A gift can convert angry speech into kind words and harshness into gentleness. Here are some practical steps you can take to overcome anger. Become aware of your anger as soon as possible. Be mindful of your anger and feel its strength. Remember that a quick temper is extremely dangerous. Bring to mind anger's miserable consequences. Practice restraint. Realize that anger and its causes are impermanent. Recall the example of the Buddha's patience with the Brahmin. Change your attitude by becoming helpful and kind. Change the atmosphere between you and a person with whom you are angry by offering a gift or other favor. Remember the advantages of practicing loving friendliness. Remember, we all will die one day, and we don't want to die with anger. Compassion. Compassion is the third skillful thought the Buddha encouraged us to cultivate. Compassion is a melting of the heart at the thought of another's suffering. It is a spontaneous, wholesome reaction coupled with a wish to alleviate another's pain. Compassion requires an object. In order to cultivate compassion, you must reflect on the suffering you have personally experienced, notice the suffering of others, and make the intuitive connection between your own painful experiences and theirs. Suppose, for example, you hear of a child being beaten or abused. You open your mind to this child's suffering by perhaps recalling the pain you felt in your heart when you were mistreated. You develop the prayerful wish, "May such pain not happen to anybody in the world. I wish that no child be abused the way I have been abused." Or when someone is ill, you reflect on how unpleasant and painful it is to suffer from sickness, and you wish that no one else suffer similar pain and anxiety. Or you recall the heartbreak of separating from someone you love. This memory leads to compassion for anyone separated from a loved one by death, distance, or rejection, and to the wish that no one need go through such pain. Compassion and loving friendliness are mutually supportive. When you are full of loving friendliness, your heart is open and your mind is clear enough to see the suffering of others. Say, for instance, that someone treats you in a snobbish or disdainful way. An attitude of loving friendliness helps you to recognize that this harsh behavior must arise from some problem or inner hurt this person is experiencing. Since you have also suffered problems in your life, your compassion arises and you think to yourself, "This person must be suffering. How can I help? If I get angry or upset, I will not be able to help in any way. I may even aggravate this person's problem." You are confident that if you continue to act in a loving and friendly way, this person will benefit, perhaps immediately and, if not, eventually. Perhaps at some later time, this person will admire how you remained loving in spite of provocation and begin to imitate this friendly way of dealing with others. The compassion of those who walk the Buddha's path is extraordinary, as in this Mahayana legend. Once there was a monk practicing meditation on compassion who wished to gain enough merit to see Maitreya, the Buddha of loving friendliness. The monk's practice had so softened his heart that he would not hurt any living being. One day he saw a dog lying by the side of the road groaning in pain. A gaping wound on the poor animal was filled with maggots. This monk knelt down in front of the dog. His first thought was to remove the maggots from the dog's wound, but then he thought, "If I use a stick to remove the worms, I may hurt them. If I use my fingers, I may crush them because they are very delicate creatures, and if I put them down on the ground, someone may step on them." Then he knew what he must do. He cut a piece of flesh from his own thigh and put it on the ground. Then he knelt down and stretched out his tongue to remove the maggots from the dog's wound and place them on his own flesh. As he did so, the dog disappeared. In its place was Maitreya, the Buddha of loving friendliness. We may consider ourselves to be compassionate people, but our level of compassion cannot compare to this. Suffering surrounds us. Every day we have many opportunities to practice compassion, yet we often find it difficult. Why? The answer is that pain, even the pain of others, is hard to endure. To avoid it, we move away, close down, make ourselves tight and rigid. Mindfulness practice helps us to relax and to soften into whatever life presents. When we allow our minds to become gentle and our hearts to open, the wellspring of our compassion can flow freely. Practicing compassion for the people in our life is challenging, to be sure, but it is critical to our happiness now and in the future. Our parents, partners, and children need our compassion. We need compassion for ourselves as well. Compassion for ourselves. Some of you may wonder why you have to practice compassion toward yourself. Caring for myself is selfish, you may say. My needs are not important. True spiritual practice is compassion for others. This sounds nice, but you may be fooling yourself. When you investigate your mind carefully, you will discover that there is no one in the whole universe that you care for more than yourself. There's nothing wrong with this. In fact, compassion for ourselves is the basis for our practice of compassion towards others. As the Buddha said, "Investigating the whole world with my mind, never did I find anyone dearer than myself." Since oneself is dearer than others, one who loves oneself should never harm others. It is a mistake to think that it is more refined or spiritual to think harshly about yourself or to view yourself as unworthy. The Buddha found through his own experience that self-mortification does not lead to enlightenment. Of course, we do need to cultivate self-restraint, but we do so out of the determination to act in our own best interests. Seen rightly, kind and gentle self-discipline is actually an aspect of practicing compassion for ourselves. Moreover, it is impossible to practice genuine compassion for others without the foundation of self-compassion. If we try to act compassionately out of a sense of personal unworthiness or the belief that others are more important than we are, the true source of our actions is aversion for ourselves, not compassion for others. Similarly, if we offer help out of a sense of cold superiority to those we are assisting, our actions may actually be motivated by pride. Genuine compassion, as we have seen, arises from the tender heart we feel for our own suffering, which we then see mirrored in the suffering of others. Self-compassion, grounded in wholesome self-love, motivates us to reach out sincerely to help. Firefighters show a good example of this motivation. They are known for their great courage in willingly risking their lives to save people trapped in a burning building. They do not deliberately sacrifice themselves, however. They do not carelessly rush into the flames, unequipped to deal with the dangers of the situation. Instead, they take every precaution, putting on helmets and heavy gear, making careful plans, and relying on their judgment and skill to determine the best way to save others without endangering themselves. In the same way, we clothe ourselves with compassion and loving friendliness toward ourselves, purifying our motives to the best of our abilities and allowing our minds to become clear and bright. From that place of clarity, we can help others effectively and also encourage our own spiritual progress. Actually, the division between self and other is more blurred in our minds than we usually realize. Whatever attitudes we habitually use toward ourselves, we will use on others, and whatever attitudes we habitually use toward others, we will use on ourselves. The situation is comparable to our serving food to ourselves and to other people from the same bowl. Everyone ends up eating the same thing, so we must examine carefully what we are dishing out. As we sit in meditation, we should examine how we act toward ourselves and others when things do not go the way we hoped, or when mistakes happen. Do we respond with blame or forgiveness, anxiety or equanimity, harshness or gentleness, patience or fury? Although it is important for us to notice our mistakes, feel their effects and pledge to improve, self-blame and other harshness serves no useful purpose. No one feels peaceful after being scolded. Generally, people recoil and become angry, defensive or stubborn. Think, for example, of a man who is exercising to lose weight. If one day he fails to do his daily exercise and compounds that failure by saying to himself, "You fat, lazy slob, you'll never change," how likely is it that he'll do his workout tomorrow? The unenlightened mind is untrained. It is ignorant. It suffers. That is why we do regrettable things. Remembering that we make mistakes because of our own suffering helps us extend compassion to ourselves rather than harsh judgment and self-abuse. It is especially important that we approach our efforts to meditate and follow the path of the Buddha with a compassionate attitude. We practice the Buddha's 8 steps to happiness to alleviate our suffering. If we add to our burden by holding an oppressive or judgmental attitude about our practice, we may soon decide, rightly, that now we're suffering even more. We may even feel compelled to quit. Western students in particular seem to fall into this mental trap. From my Eastern perspective, they often seem ambitious, driven, goal-oriented, and insecure. When they first begin to meditate and discover the mind's monkey nature, they try right away to control it. They clamp down on the mind and try to make it behave by sheer force of will. But the mind does not follow anybody's command. Often they get frustrated and become self-judging and harsh. A similar thing can happen to more experienced students who feel disappointed that they have not yet achieved their spiritual goals. It is important for any student of the Buddha's path to remember that there is a difference between watching the mind and controlling the mind. Watching the mind with a gentle, open attitude allows the mind to settle down and come to rest. Trying to control the mind or trying to control the way that one's spiritual practice will unfold just stirs up more agitation and suffering. We can open and soften our minds. Nothing that arises in meditation is a sign of failure. There is only the failure to watch. If unwholesome thoughts arise and persist, we should not struggle with them or beat ourselves up. Instead, we should calmly and compassionately apply skillful effort to overcome them and to uplift the mind. No one is uniquely bad. Everyone in the world has the same problems: greed, anger, jealousy, pride, bad days, disappointments, and impatience come to all unenlightened beings. When we make a habit of meeting the mind's many changes with compassion, the mind can relax. Then we can see more clearly, and we continue to grow in understanding. Compassion for our parents. Many of us have hard, unkind feelings toward our parents. Some find it difficult to forgive things they did when we were children. Child abuse and other harmful actions may have caused us pain and suffering. These misdeeds cannot be excused, nor can they be forgotten easily. What they did can never be undone, but what we do in this moment can affect our current and future happiness. One way to develop compassion is to think about how much your parents suffered in bringing you into the world and raising you. The Buddha said that even if you carry your parents, one on each shoulder, for the rest of your life, caring for all their needs, still you would not have repaid them for what they have done for you. Parents sacrifice sleep, comfort, food, time, and energy for days, months, years. Consider the utter helplessness of a baby, how demanding its needs are. Think of the fear your mother and father may have felt trying to protect you, how they nursed you through illnesses and worried over your troubles. Rather than blaming them for acting in confused ways, consider the pain and suffering their confused minds must have caused them as they wrestled with the challenges of caring for a child. Consider how hard they may have struggled to free themselves from addictions and other destructive behaviors motivated by desire, hatred, and ignorance. Then consider that the parents who raised you are not identical to the parents you know today. Time has passed, and impermanence changes everyone. As your parents have grown older, they may have softened or developed greater wisdom. You have matured as well. Don't stay stuck in your childhood relationship. As your parents age, you may even need to switch roles and provide them with material, emotional, and spiritual support. Caring for your parents' needs can open your heart of compassion. Even if your parents never gave you anything but your life and endless pain, you can at least feel sorry for them and wish them happiness. I wish I could help my parents to have a better state of mind. Compassion has no limit, no boundary. Compassion for children. Maintaining equilibrium in your life can be doubly hard when you are raising children. Bringing up children in a balanced manner can be compared to walking a tightrope 500 feet above the ground. On the one hand, dealing with them in a harsh and rigid manner may earn your children's lasting enmity. On the other hand, without giving them structure and a sense of discipline, children will not learn about limits or the consequences of their actions. If children are loved and taught, trained and cared for with the honor and respect they deserve as human beings, they will mature into responsible, loving and kind adults. Your children will shoulder the burdens of the world after you have gone. They can bring peace and happiness to you, to other members of the family, to society, and to the whole world. But as any parent knows, children can try the patience of the most tolerant person. When you find yourself struggling with them, remind yourself to find a place of selflessness in your heart. Let go of your need for things to turn out the way you want. Put more effort into understanding your children's points of view, their needs, fears, or concerns. And when you have a better grasp of what they are struggling with, your heart will melt with compassion. With a compassionate state of mind, your actions will always carry a tone of kindness and softness, which is very useful in overcoming difficulty with anyone, child or adult. If you lack compassion for your children, you can, fortunately, still cultivate it. It just takes practice. People are not born knowing how best to raise a child to become a healthy, responsible, loving adult. This skill must be learned. If you are a parent, it is incumbent upon you to learn as much as possible about how to bring up children in a wholesome way, without teaching them greed, hatred, and ignorance. These unwholesome influences are already abundant enough in the world. Above all, you can show compassion to children when you teach them letting go, loving friendliness, and compassion. Compassion for your partner. Practicing compassion for your partner requires generosity and patience. We each have a different personal style. Some of us are good at expressing emotions. We laugh and cry easily and often. Others find it hard to say what we're feeling and never cry at all. Some of us are happiest when we're working and enjoying putting in long hours on the job. Others get their work done quickly and prefer to spend their time reading, meditating, or visiting friends. None of these styles are right or wrong. A partner who likes to work enjoys life as much as a partner who prefers travel. Both are trying to avoid suffering and to be as happy as possible. Both can be good, kind human beings. Focus on your partner's good qualities. Sometimes your heart may harden against your partner after a conflict. Angry thoughts may run repeatedly through your mind, building up your own case and judging your partner's shortcomings. You may need to do some hard inner work before your compassion can arise. In meditation, you can reflect on your own unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind, identifying all the ways in which you have been greedy, selfish, hateful, jealous, or proud. Then, with an open mind, you can look at how these actions may have affected your partner. If you are resentful, that is your own shortcoming, no matter what your partner did. Are you clinging to something? Attachment and genuine love are far apart. If the situation with your partner is impossible to put up with and cannot be improved, then you may need to end it, but then leave in a loving way, acknowledging your own shortcomings and wishing your partner well. Why hurt your partner with more anger and blame? It is very important that you do not compare your actions to your partner's or judge your partner's behavior as unskillful. Rather, focus on your own actions and take responsibility for them. Recall those times when you looked into your partner's eyes and saw the pain you caused. Remind yourself that you have caused this person you love to suffer. If you can admit your own faults, if you can see how hurtful your actions were and tap into a sense of concern for your partner's well-being, then compassion and loving friendliness will flow. You've had an ugly quarrel in the morning, let's say. Later, your partner comes home looking stiff and angry and glances at you guardedly to see if you are angry. But you have examined your own faults and opened up your heart's wellspring of love and compassion, so you meet your partner's eyes with a soft, warm expression. Through your compassion, the relationship between the two of you heals. Mindfulness of skillful thinking. As we sit in meditation, many things go through our minds. We may hear sounds, feel an itch, and think about many kinds of things. We may even forget briefly that we are meditating and that we are trying to stay focused on the breath. This is normal. It happens to everybody. When something takes our attention away from the breath, we should examine it briefly, just long enough to notice its impermanence, how it arises, peaks, and falls away. Then we return to the breath. Some thoughts or mental states, however, are tricky and require special attention. The unwholesome thoughts arising from greed, hatred, or delusion whenever we are not mindful. No wisdom develops while the mind is lost in unwholesome thoughts. Not only do we waste our time and create painful feelings, we also reinforce the mental habits that cause all our suffering. We must overcome unwholesome thoughts right away, quickly rebuking them with mindfulness before they overtake us, become entrenched, and dominate the meditation session. Sometimes such thoughts go away by the simple act of giving brief attention to their impermanence. Other times we must rouse strong effort to overcome them. We will examine various ways to do this when we discuss skillful effort. Once an unwholesome thought has been overcome, we go back to the breath with a slightly deeper level of focus. If another negative thought arises, we repeat our efforts. Each time an unwholesome thought has been overcome, we deepen our concentration. Eventually we find that our concentration is so steady that all thoughts stop coming. It may take many meditation sessions for this state of concentration to come about, or it may happen more quickly. Once we have achieved deep concentration, we can use that powerful state to return to our practice of mindfulness, again examining objects as they come to our attention. Since thoughts have vanished, we examine other objects such as body sensations or positive mental qualities like bliss or equanimity. We focus on the impermanence and related characteristics of these objects, just as before, but with strong concentration, our insight grows dramatically. So long as the state of strong concentration lasts, no unwholesome thoughts arise to disrupt our meditation. Until we reach that level of concentrated meditation, however, we must skillfully deal with unwholesome thoughts as they arise. We must tackle such thoughts whenever they come up, even outside meditation sessions. Mindfulness of skillful thinking refers to all these efforts. One of the methods for overcoming an unwholesome thought is to examine the downsides of that thought. You see how it debases the mind. You see how your habitual negative thinking causes difficulties in your life. Then you can cultivate the opposite, a wholesome thought, such as the feeling of compassion. This is a great opportunity for you to look at yourself and change your life by changing your thinking. People often ask me, how can I integrate my meditation practice in my daily life? I often respond with questions of my own. What did you do on the cushion? Did you merely focus the mind on the breath? If that is all you did, you have two different lives going on, your life on the cushion and everyday ordinary life. There is much work to be done in meditation. The same difficult mental states that create problems in our daily lives, greed, fear, anger, jealousy, self-criticism, come to us in meditation. They may emerge in the form of unwholesome thinking at any moment in which our mindfulness or concentration lapses. First, we make effort to simply let go of those thoughts. We do this both to purify the mind in this moment and to train the mind in the habit of self-purification. When a thought is so strong that it persists despite your best efforts, that is the signal to do more intensive work. Now you must look hard at these thoughts and put them to use to develop insight into your life. For example, let's say that in meditation I get lost in angry thoughts about a stranger who insulted me. I've tried other methods for overcoming these thoughts, but the thoughts don't go away. So I examine them. First, I look at how this thought is affecting my practice, how it creates tension in my body and affects my blood pressure, how it generates a lingering sense of ill will toward this person. I see that such angry thoughts are no good because they hurt me and affect my mind so negatively that I may even harm others. Next, perhaps, I consider how embarrassed I would be if others knew what I was thinking, and I develop a wholesome sense of shame that such thoughts dominate my mind. This kind of examination often creates enough distance to free the mind from the negative state. Once the mind is clear, I may examine my thoughts more deeply, reflecting on what caused them. Why did I remain upset after being insulted? I asked myself. What did I cling to that made the insult stick in my mind? I may discover that the cause was something in my past that has nothing to do with the insult. Next, I think, okay, it's true that this man insulted me, but what did I do to upset him? Was I too hasty or greedy? Too arrogant? Maybe I meant no harm, but I know I've upset people this way before. Let me do better next time. Reflecting thus upon my unskillful motives and actions, I resolve to improve. Once I see my own part in the conflict, I can even develop compassion for this man who suffered so badly that he needed to strike back at me with an insult. This kind of self-reflection is a critical part of meditation practice. Before his enlightenment, the Buddha himself practiced in this way, using his unwholesome thoughts as a means to look inside and correct his faults. As he meditated in the forest before his enlightenment, the Buddha said to himself, "I have this weakness. I have done that in the past. From now on, my behavior must be different." You can do the same. If you recall an occasion when you spoke harshly to a child and saw hurt and puzzlement in her eyes, you can resolve to apologize to her and speak more compassionately in the future. Or if you recall a conversation when you held on stubbornly to your views, even when they were shown to be mistaken, resolve to let go of grasping more gracefully next time. If a persistent desire arises, such as for ice cream or a new CD, you can use the opportunity to cultivate its opposite, generosity. You can think, I don't need that right now. I can let go of this desire. If your perspective is generous and open-hearted, eventually the desire for that sense pleasure will diminish. You can then recognize how petty or self-centered your desire really was. By so doing, you come to better understand the nature of craving. After using this new understanding to correct your thinking, return to the breath. Another good strategy when your thinking has spun out of control and your mind is filled with pain, restlessness, and worry is to use your own suffering to cultivate wholesome thoughts of compassion. Seeing the pain in your mind, you reflect how suffering affects other people as well. This phenomenon isn't particular to me. Everyone experiences it, and right now there are many others who are suffering more than I am. A student of mine told me that at one time he was feeling tremendously depressed. Walking alone in a park one day, he came across a scrap of newspaper. He picked it up and read a story of a man who was walking along, deeply miserable, because he had only one shoe. As he limped along, his bare foot, cold and sore, the man with one shoe passed a man who had only one leg. Gratitude filled his heart. "Well, at least I still have both legs," the man said to himself, and his sorrow left him. Reading this story, my student felt a surge of compassion for those whose troubles are worse than his own, and his depression vanished. You can use a similar technique any time thoughts of grief, anger, or mental pain overwhelm you. Just stop and ask yourself, why should I complain? My mind is functioning, I have all my senses, I have access to spiritual teachings and time and a place to meditate. Compared to many people in the world, I live in luxury. Millions of people have no home, no food, no hope. Rather than feeling unhappy, let me cultivate compassion for these people. Compassion calms and soothes our thoughts so that we can return to the breath with a steadier, more concentrated mind. This kind of training is not just for formal meditation. What we do in sitting practice, we must carry over to every other moment. We take our training in mindfulness with us into our everyday lives and apply it in all circumstances. On the bus, at work, when we're feeling ill, when we're out shopping. Otherwise, what's the use of so many hours on the cushion? Make every effort to avoid or cut off unwholesome states of mind and to encourage wholesome ones, just as you do on the cushion. It is very challenging to practice in this way outside of meditation because each day presents us with countless opportunities to get carried away by greedy, angry, or deluded reactions to sense impressions. Say you are visiting a shopping mall and see some attractive items in the store window. Because of your undisciplined thoughts, you cannot pull your eyes away. You enter the shop and examine the items. You feel you cannot leave without buying one or two. Perhaps you do not have the cash right now, but you have your credit card. You pick something up and buy it. To practice skillful thinking, you must stop yourself during this process, just as you would when recognizing an unwholesome thought while sitting on the cushion. First, sort through and identify your thoughts and feelings. Inquire whether greed or fear or insecurity is driving you to make an unnecessary purchase. Then reason with yourself, I want to pay off the balance on this card. Do I really want to go deeper into debt? Even if you have plenty of money, it is still important to purify greed from your thinking process. Ask yourself, is this item necessary or am I buying it for some other reason? Do I just want to impress people? Don't I already have some similar things collecting dust in my closet? You may also ask, is there a better use for this money, some way I can use it to help other people? If you feel unsure of your motives, perhaps because greed and necessity are mixed together, or because the desire is overwhelming, ask yourself, can this purchase wait? Can I walk away for now and come back next week? Can I ask the clerk to hold this while I cool off and think about it? This kind of reasoning makes skillful use of the good habits that we practice in sitting meditation. Such training will definitely help us when we encounter more difficult challenges. Once I had to use my practice of skillful thinking to overcome fear in a situation of genuine danger. I had received word of my mother's final illness. On the way to Sri Lanka from Washington, D.C., I changed planes to a jumbo jet in Hawaii. An hour or two after taking off from Hawaii, I looked out my window and noticed flames coming from the plane's engine. Then the pilot's voice came over the intercom. He announced that the engine was on fire and that we were turning back. He told the flight attendants to give instructions on how we should exit the plane if we managed to get back to Hawaii. The flight attendant told us to sit quietly with our seatbelts on. When we landed, floor lights would lead us to the 8 emergency doors. The doors would open and emergency chutes would come out. We were to jump onto the chutes without a moment's hesitation, slide down and run away from the plane. I doubt anybody understood much of these instructions. From the moment the pilot had announced that the engine was on fire, everyone in the cabin seemed to be seized with fear of death. Some started crossing themselves, couples clutched each other and kissed, others wept or looked tense and anxious. I thought, if this is my time to die, well, I will die anyway, whether I'm afraid or not. Let me keep my mind clear. First, I recalled my intellectual understanding of what death is. I considered that death is inevitable, and that this would be a good time for me to die, for I had been doing good deeds and I had nothing to regret. Then I thought about the likely sequence of events. If the plane falls quickly from a height of 39,000 feet, we will be unconscious before the plane hits the ocean. I don't know whether this is scientifically true, but that is what I thought at the time. I exhorted myself, I have to keep my mind very clear, very pure before I lose consciousness. This is the time to use my mindfulness to realize the inevitability of death. If I die peacefully with a pure, clear state of mind, my future life will be bright. Perhaps I will attain a stage of enlightenment through seeing the truth of impermanence. I must not block my mind with fear or confusion. No matter how strong my attachment to life, I must let go of that attachment now. Thus I made the effort to prevent any unwholesome state of mind from arising in the face of death, and encouraged wholesome states of mind to arise. Perhaps I was just too stunned to feel afraid, but I felt no fear. I actually enjoyed watching the flames coming out of the engine at 39,000 feet. The flames were blue, yellow, and red. You seldom see such blue flames. Sometimes they were streaming out, sometimes they were low. They looked like fireworks or the aurora borealis. While I was enjoying the drama, the 300 or so other people on the plane were suffering terribly. I looked at the other passengers from time to time and saw the agony they suffered from the very thought of death. They seemed almost to be dead before they died. I noticed, however, that the little children did not seem affected. They kept laughing and playing as they did before the crisis. I thought, let me put myself in their place, in a childlike mind. We did make it back to Hawaii, and the plane made an emergency landing. We went out the emergency doors as instructed, sliding down the chutes. Going down the chute was an entirely new experience for me. Perhaps everyone else on the plane had at least gone down a playground slide in their childhood, but I had never done such a thing in the poor village where I grew up. Thus, right up to the end, I enjoyed it all very much. Key points for mindfulness of skillful thinking. As we are discovering, walking the Buddha's path to happiness requires practicing each of the 8 steps in the real world. We need recipients to accept our generous gifts. We need friends and enemies to inspire our friendly love. We need suffering beings to develop our compassion. Human society provides a perfect testing ground for these key points of skillful thinking. When we develop skillful understanding, skillful thinking flows naturally. Thinking can make us happy or miserable. The Buddha pointed us toward 3 skillful thoughts: letting go or generosity in the highest sense, loving friendliness, and compassion. Begin your practice of generosity with giving away material things. Clinging to anything, form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, or consciousness, makes us unhappy. When fear arises, let it grow and watch as it peaks and fades away. Loving friendliness, a sense of interconnectedness with all beings, and a sincere wish for them to be happy, has far-reaching effects. Your anger will ultimately hurt you more than the person you're angry with. Take action to overcome your anger. Mindfulness can help you minimize and eventually eliminate your anger. Compassion is a spontaneous, wholesome melting of the heart at the suffering of others, coupled with a wish to alleviate their pain. Developing compassion for yourself, your parents, your children, and your partner will help you relax and soften your heart. When negative thoughts arise during meditation, they may go away if you merely pay attention to their passing nature. If a negative train of thought persists despite your best efforts, that is the signal to explore it thoroughly, to develop insight into the habits of your life. Reflecting on unwholesome thoughts is a critical part of meditation practice. Practicing skillful thinking on the cushion can help you check your fear, anger, and craving in everyday life.